We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam's first canto, second chapter, Divinity and Divine Service, continuing with text number 6. Savai pungsam paro dharmo yado bhakti radokshaje ahaitukiya pratiyata yayatma suprasidati. Translation by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. The supreme occupation, dharma, for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving and devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted in order to completely satisfy the self. Purport in this statement. Sri Sutta Goswami answers the first question of the sages of Naimisharanya. The sages asked him to summarize a whole range of revealed scriptures and present the most essential part so that fallen people, or the people in general, might easily take it up. The Vedas prescribe two different types of occupation for the human being. One is called the pravriti marg, or the path of sense enjoyment, and the other is called the nivritti marg, or the path of renunciation. The path of enjoyment is inferior, but the path of sacrifice for the supreme cause is superior. The material existence of the living being is a diseased condition of actual life. Actual life is spiritual existence, or Brahma Bhuta existence, where life is eternal, blissful, and full of knowledge. Material existence is temporary, illusory, and full of miseries. There is no happiness at all. There is just the futile attempt to get rid of the miseries, and temporary cessation of misery is falsely called happiness. Therefore, the path of progressive material enjoyment, which is temporary, miserable, and illusory, is inferior. But devotional service of the Supreme Lord, which leads one to eternal, blissful, and all-cognizant life, is called the superior quality of occupation. This is sometimes polluted when mixed with the inferior quality. For example, adoption of devotional service for material gain is certainly an obstruction to the progressive path of renunciation. Renunciation or abnegation for ultimate good is certainly a better occupation than enjoyment in the diseased condition of life. Such enjoyment only aggravates the symptoms of disease and increases its duration. Therefore, devotional service of the Lord must be pure in quality, that is, without the least desire for material enjoyment. One should therefore accept the superior quality of occupation in the form of devotional service of the Lord without any tinge of unnecessary desire, fruitive action, and philosophical speculation. This alone can lead one to perpetual solace in his service. We have purposely denoted dharma as occupation because the root meaning of the word dharma is that which sustains one's existence. A living being's sustenance of existence is to coordinate his activities with his eternal relation with the Supreme Lord Krishna. Krishna is the central pivot of living beings, and he is the all-attractive living entity or eternal form amongst all other living beings or eternal forms. Each and every living being has his eternal form in his spiritual existence, and Krishna is the eternal attraction for all of them. Krishna is a complete whole, and everything else is his part and parcel. The relation is one of the servant and the served, and it is transcendental and is completely distinguished from our experience in material existence. This relation of servant and the served is the most congenial form of intimacy. One can realize it as devotional service progresses. Everyone should engage himself in that transcendental loving service of the Lord, even in the present conditional state of material existence. That will gradually give one the clue to actual life and please him to complete satisfaction. Savai pungsang paro dharmo yato bhaktira dokshate ahaitukiya pratiyata yayatma suprasidati. The supreme occupation, dharma, for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted in order to completely satisfy the self. Om Jnanatimiranda Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitamina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Bandi Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sahuritao Gaudadai Pushpavanto Chidro Shando Tamonudao. So, we are, Srila Sutta Goswami is starting to answer the questions of the sages of Naimisharanya, and this is the third verse in a long series of very known verses in the Bhagavatam. So we started with the verse Narayana Namaskritya, 2 verses back, where Srila Goswami he offers his praise to different transcendental entities. And then the verse last time, which our prabhu here very enthusiastically elaborated on about the qualities of the questions, the necessity of questions and answers, how this is very central to the process of devotional service. And then today, Srila Sutta Goswami is continuing with his elaboration on the process of devotional service, answering the questions by the sages. And both in this verse and the previous verse, Munayasa Prishtoham, we have the same ending, the same fourth line. It's similar. Well, it's not. It's actually the same, just a little grammatical difference. Today it's called Yayatma Suprasidati, and the previous verse was Yenatma Suprasidati, but actually it's the same verse. There's a little whatever grammatical thing, a little change, but it actually means Yaya or Yena means that which. So that which gives the Atma, the self, suprasidati, full satisfaction. Prasidati means satisfaction, and su, the prefix su, means it's very much enhanced, so supreme, complete satisfaction. So last time, that which gives one complete satisfaction is the proper questions and answers related to the root of all existence, the Supreme Lord. Such question and answers can give that deep satisfaction that the living entity is always hankering for. And here today states what gives that complete satisfaction. That is when one engages, when the living entity, the infinitesimal living entity, the Jivatma, engages in parodharma, in his constitutional position. So dharma is a term that's generally explained as being religious duties. But dharma actually has a deeper meaning than that. There's different kinds of dharma. Religious activities for relative to different living entities. Like there's Sri Dharma, there's the Dharma of the husband, Dharma of the wife, there's the dharma of the teacher, there's the dharma of the prajapatis, so many. They're all relative to the person. But these are activities that one has to engage in according to scripture to attain advancement in life. And Srila Prabhupada explains it. Here it explained at that which sustains one's existence. So we all need sustenance to exist. And dharma is that which gives sustenance to progression and actually just existing. So that's one definition of dharma. Another more known definition given by Srila Prabhupada is the intrinsic nature of a thing. So Srila Prabhupada is explaining this in different places. We also heard actually this very same verse we heard Srila Prabhupada in a lecture just yesterday or the day before, where he spoke on this verse in New York City in 1973, the very same verse. And there he explained it's the intrinsic nature of a living thing. And then he was explaining, like for instance, water. The dharma of water, that which is intrinsic to water, is liquidity. You cannot take liquidity from water and then it's not water. Or another place like sugar and sweetness. Sweetness is the dharma of sugar. If sugar is not sweet, it's not sugar. You cannot separate sweetness from sugar. You cannot separate liquidity from water. So this is the dharma, the intrinsic nature of the thing. So the dharma of the jiva, of the infinitesimal living entity, all of us, is seva. Is service. You cannot take service away from the living entity. It's not possible. So someone may think in illusion that they are not performing service, they're only taking service. Like someone in this material world in a very high position, being the CEO of a gigantic corporation, everyone is following the bid of that CEO, that big person, or the president of the country or whatever. Oh, everyone is serving me, assisting me for my gains, for my pleasure, for my profit, for whatever. But no, everyone has to serve. That person, which may be a big CEO of a big corporation, when he gets back, he has to serve his wife. You know, he may be ordering everyone at the company, all his the different departmental heads, and they're coming to him, and what are we going to do about this problem, that development, whatever, and he's, you know, giving all his instructions. So he's a big person, big name on the door. Get there, and in order to get to see him, you have to go through his private secretary or whatever. So he may feel, oh, just see, you know, this, my name is on the front of this big building, whatever. But when he gets back, his wife saying, oh, did you do that? Or why haven't you done that? Or whatever. And then he has to follow his wife. That's very general. Or he has to serve his kids. Oh, daddy, please give me this, please give me that. And then he's serving them. He's working hard to fulfill the desires of his family, his wife and children and relatives, whatever. He's serving so many things. And also, ultimately, we're all serving our senses, the dictates of our senses. So we are not our senses, we have senses. And the conditioned living entity are forced to serve the senses. When the tongue says, I want this, want that, you have to follow it. You're hungry, you have to serve the belly. When the genitals are pushing you, that the person has to serve the genitals. And the conditioned living entity is serving his senses all the time. And they think, I'm the master. But, and the mind is taking here and there. They think, I'm the master, but he's actually serving all these things. Serving the senses, serving the mind. Serving so many living entities. You cannot but serve. That's the dharma of the living entity. So many different dharmas relative to the different persons. But here in the Bhagavatam it speaks about the paro dharma. And paro, or para, means a higher. So translated here as a supreme occupation. So the supreme occupation above all relative occupations is seva to the Supreme Lord, service to the Supreme Lord. Not service to anyone else. That may be relative Dharma, but the supreme Dharma is serving the cause of all existence. That from which everything emanates. And that we know from Shastra is the Supreme Lord Krishna. So, that's the highest occupation any living entity can engage in. And only by that engagement can one attain, when that Dharma is free, when it's uninterrupted, yayatma suprasidati, haituki apratiyata. When it's unmotivated, has no motivation, any material motivation, I'll serve Krishna because of, then I get this, I get that, or whatever. No, it has to be unmotivated, simply to please the Supreme Lord. And it has to be uninterrupted. So when we can serve the Supreme Lord continuously, without any stoppage, when the consciousness is fully involved in serving Krishna every single moment of the day, and even when one is very purified and advanced, one will think of Krishna and service to Krishna or Krishna's Leela when one is sleeping. That's the Uttam Adhikari, the one whose heart is completely purified from any tinges of material desires. So, when the seva is like that, when there's no stoppage to it, and when it's not tinged with any material qualities, then it gives yayatma suprasidati, then it fully satisfies the self. And as Srila Prabhupada explained in the purport, that material life is a disease. It's a disease of the soul. Because the soul in its natural position is fully absorbed in transcendence in the spiritual energy. And in that spiritual energy, it's engaged in practical service to the Supreme Lord. And in that situation, because that's a natural condition, that's spiritual existence, our real nature is spiritual, because we are spiritual by nature. And so when we engage in spiritual activities, we are fully satisfied. So anything in this material world is termed as a disease. We are in a diseased condition, thinking that contact with the material senses, the material energy in its either gross or subtle form will bring us satisfaction, but it cannot bring us satisfaction. And we see it practically in this world. Anyone, no matter how much money they have, how much beauty they have, how much fame they have, physical strength, none of them are fully satisfied. And it was said by, I think it was George Harrison who said it, definitely one from the Beatles, when they were in the heyday, when they were they peaked in their fame, they had so much incredible fame, and everyone was adoring them, and everyone was like worshipping them basically. When they entered somewhere, everyone was like, all the women, young girls were screaming at like I saw films from that time when they came on stage, they started playing and they were freaking out, both young men and women especially, like they were crying, all these girls were crying, like this was like God manifested. They were so overwhelmed by feelings. So they were like basically worshipped. They had all that money, all that fame, they could get anything, even heads of state were like wanting to meet them. So they had that material ability of being good musicians. So George Harrison, after they attained all that fame, money, whatever material things, he said it was like they reached the top and he experienced it was like cold. There was nothing there. He wasn't really satisfied. And we've seen this time after time again. So like Elvis Presley, the same situation, all that fame, all that money. And how did he end his life? He was completely miserable, just locking himself up, eating burgers and drinking Coke and whatever, becoming obese, and he died a miserable life. He had everything, and that example goes with everyone, whether the big business magnate, whether political leader, rock star, movie star, or whatever history shows time after time again. What do? They engage in excessive sense gratification. Many of them, they take like drugs, and especially these rock stars. and and many of them end like miserable, time after time again. Back in time, before our time, there was Errol Flynn. He was a big macho movie star hero, and the same, his life became completely, at the end everyone abandoned him and he died in poverty in a room somewhere. So again and again. So material existence is a disease, and we cannot gain full satisfaction by, no matter how great amounts of sense gratification, money, fame, whatever we get. It's not possible. So we have to engage according to our nature, and our nature is Jivera Surupa Hoy Krishnera Nitya Das. Our real position is the servant of the Supreme Lord. That's the nature of the living entity. So we have to engage in Dharma. And that Dharma, how do we perform that Dharma? That's also given just a few verses further ahead in verse number 12. Tatchadadana munayo jnana vairakta yuktaya pashanchatmanichatmanam bhaktya shruta grihitaya. Bhaktya shruta. Shruta comes from shruti. Shruti actually means that which is given verbally. That's the scriptures. Because before the scriptures was put down on palm leaves 5,000 years ago by Srila Vyasadeva, it was given orally, tradition. Previous times people had so sharp memory that they could remember things just by hearing it once. Imagine that. Today we can't remember anything. Memory of the living entities today have gone like this much down, even from our childhood, like we were not, we had to hear things many times, but today people can't remember anything. They have like the concentration span of a goldfish, it's like, and then they have to go on to something else. Everyone is like in their mobile phone or whatever. They have to get all the time. They cannot fix their consciousness on something for very long. So it's really gone down. But previous times, before the Vedas was written down 5,000 years ago, that spiritual knowledge was given orally. That's what it's called Shruti. But Shruti means the scriptures also. So we have to engage in Dharma according to the scriptures. The knowledge how to perform the Parodharma is given in the scriptures. So that's like we just read today. This verse of the Bhagavatam, and then Srila Prabhupada's elaboration is just so lucid. It's just so clear actually. But for the most in this present age of Kali, it's very difficult. Manda sumanda matayo. People are lazy in this age to spiritual life, and again, I said, memory is very short, and time, lifespan, everything has been decreased. So we should engage. We should study the Bhagavatam very, very carefully, as also stated in the previous verse. We should put questions, proper questions to all these things. And we get the answers from the Bhagavatam and from the devotees, those who have realized the knowledge. And then we should engage in giving this knowledge to others, as explained in the Bhagavad Gita, the very end of the Gita, in not the last verses, but almost 68 and 69. Krishna explains in the Gita, how is that? He explains in the Tasmat Manush, I forgot the Sanskrit, but he explains that this knowledge has to be given to everyone, the knowledge that he gave in the Bhagavad Gita. And then he states in the last verse, I forgot the Sanskrit now, there's no one more dear to me in this world than someone who gives that knowledge. So the occupation, part of our paradharma, that is, we are serving the Lord, and at this present state our service to Krishna is to give Krishna to others, give the knowledge of Krishna to others. That's what Krishna explains in those two verses in the Gita. So we do that in different ways, by giving a lecture like here and putting on the internet. That's one way of distributing and sharing that knowledge. And we go on the street and we do Harinam, which we are going to do again at one point when it's less busy here at the farm. giving the holy name to others. And then we're establishing a devotee community here, which is our main focus at this present point. That's our service to Krishna, establishing a small community for devotees where people can live off the land, simple living, high thinking, where we can become as independent from the external society as possible, because as we see in this present day and age, that the material society is collapsing more and more. We're not seeing it full-fledged, but it's going on in the world. So it's very important. Srila Prabhupada stressed that we have to create these devotional communities, farm communities, living off the land, and ideally getting cows, living with mother cow, and like that. So that's how we do our paradharma, that's how we do our service. And then we can attract people. People can come and live peacefully in the association of devotees, engaging in Shravanam, Kirtan, in hearing and chanting about Krishna. In this way, we perform our dharma, our paradharma, and by doing it purely without any motivation and uninterrupted, we can become fully satisfied. So maybe there's some questions or comments. Prabhuji.
Just a comment, because I was thinking in the beginning, like Prabhupada says that dharma is that which sustains one's life.
Yeah.
And I thought it's a little strange that Prabhupada gives the material definition, so-called material definition of dharma, because this verse is definitely about the spiritual definition. But then I was thinking, actually sustains one's life. What is one's life? So it's actually both.
It is.
So it's a very good definition.
Yeah.
Again, Prabhupada's genius, like he's just picking the right words all the time.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Both material and spiritual. We need sustenance, and the same spiritual. We can't maintain our spiritual life unless we engage in dharma. And then it's not really spiritual life.
Yeah. I was thinking about the words unmotivated and uninterrupted.
Yeah.
Of course, it must be in the spiritual sense of, percepting the word, because, I mean, if it's materially, is you cannot, it's like, Krishna is formless, it is said, and the Mayavadis, they grab it, but it's in the material conception of things that he's without a material form. So unmotivated, we can be motivated in so many ways spiritually, but if we are materially motivated, then it will not satisfy the soul. So can you elaborate on this? And also the uninterrupted part may seem very challenging to people who are somewhat engaged in material activities, but perhaps to sustain themselves working, for example. So if you're engaged in your mind thinking of Krishna while you do a material occupation, for example work, would you be able to facilitate or to meet with this criteria anyway? Can you elaborate? I'm sorry, it's not clear.
Well, you have a devotional service can be tinged, as Prabhupada explains here in the verse. It can be tinged by other things. It can be tinged by jnana, it can be tinged by karma. Karma means activities, material activities. So people come to Krishna consciousness with different motivations. As we know, 4 classes of living entities come to Krishna and take up devotional service. Those who are distressed, those who are in need of money, those who are inquisitive, and those who want higher knowledge. And so many, often, Prabhu here states, everyone basically comes due to distress, or maybe a mixture of certain, both distress and inquisitiveness or higher knowledge. So many comes because they want some material relief. That's why most come. So they engage in devotional service to get rid of material suffering. That's a motivation. They're here. So that's not pure. But, they're approaching, they're pious, as Krishna, they're all considered pious. but it's not pure, or they want money. Some come to Krishna consciousness because they want material prosperity, like especially in poor countries like that. And we see it very much, especially in India. It's not that everyone in India is poor, but it's to a greater extent. And many come and they join the ISKCON or some devotional community because they can see they can live in the temple and they get food every day and they get clothing and they get shelter and they get all the necessities of life. So that's a motivation why they are there. It's not pure. It's tinged by material desires. So there's Karma Mishra Bhakti and Jnana Mishra Bhakti. Means the devotional service is tinged. It's mixed with something else. So that's mixed devotional service, and actually many are doing that. But then as devotees, you're speaking about that we have to engage in. To sustain our material existence, we need money. We need money to pay the bills, to pay the electricity bill, etc. So that money doesn't come we can't plug it on the trees, or it doesn't come raining down from the sky. So we have to get money, and that's generally coming by some work. Either we have our own business, we do whatever we do, and we generate income by our skills about the land or whatever. Or we have a job in material society. So that's needed for most. As we see, most devotees are out there in the material society and either taking education or having a job. And in that situation, in order to sustain themselves and their families, they have to engage in that job. And doing that, they are in contact with the material energy, because around them they have not devotees but material people. And the different actions they are doing, they're intermingling with the material energy. So it's very hard to not become influenced by that. So how can one be engaged in devotional service without stoppage by being engaged in that activity? Well, it's very, very hard. In practically speaking, I have that experience myself, being out in material society and working for years as a teacher, and it's not easy to think of Krishna all the time and be on the transcendental platform. How can you do that when you're in the classroom? Have to give, teach the kids and dealing with, all the problems that's associated with that job, or whatever job it is. No, you cannot practically, it's very hard. So it's a phase of life. It's a phase of life actually. You do as much as you can by having like a strong, preferably strong morning program. Then you take that Shakti, that spiritual potency from that morning program, and that makes it easier to go through all that encountering the material energy. You can more easily kind of get back to transcendental consciousness all the time. Krishna is there kind of lurking in the background. But if you don't have that strength from the morning program, it is more hard. I also had that experience, and it's very difficult. So, but actually that's also why it's a progression through the ashrams, so the brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha and sannyas. So in the grihastha ashram, most are engaged either in generating money by their own business, whatever it is, or by having a job in material society. So it's harder in that ashram to be fully Krishna conscious, because you have the dharma of a family. You have to sustain the family. Both the man and the woman, traditionally speaking, it's a man and the woman goes at home, but in present day society, it's to pay all the bills. It needs mostly two incomes, so the lady has to be out there working too, in many cases. So it's harder to be having the devotional service uninterrupted in that situation and unmotivated. It's more difficult than Grihastha ashram. That's why it's a progression. So after Grihastha ashram it comes Vanaprastha. Then you renounce family life, or man and husband, as recommended by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, our Acharya, in this present age of Kali. It's Kshetra Sannyas. Husband and wife go together to a holy place and engage fully in devotional service. They're older, the children has, gone away from home, they take care of themselves. So then they engage together in devotional service. There's no more all these activities, sex life is far behind them, all the other things, so they can engage more with their heart in devotional service. So that's recommended. So either that husband and wife together, or the husband alone, the wife alone, and she's in a protected environment with all senior Vaishnavis, that's also going on, depending upon the situation. And then finally sannyas, even though that's not a necessity, also stated, vanaprastha is enough also, but still it's a progression if you can go. You can also be fully renounced in the vanaprastha ashram, because as sannyas means you have to preach, and not everyone is a preacher going around, but you have to be completely renounced at the last stage of life, and then unmotivated and uninterrupted service is more easily available. It's difficult in the grihastha ashram. Thank you very much for your attention. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Krishna Bhakti